So we're going to go ahead, finish these last 4 problems up, and then you will have some time to work on homework. It says, find the equation of each ellipse described below. The vertices of the ellipse are 2, 0 and negative 2, 0, and the length of the minor axis is 2. So if you want to think about that as a little picture, we could draw a small graph. 2, 3, 4. I'm going to take it out to about 4. Okay. So it says the vertices are at 2, 0 and negative 2, 0. So those are my vertices. And the length of the minor axis is 2. Well, at this point, I don't actually have the center graphed, so I can't go to. And I know we have the picture of the graph here, so graphically we could find what the center is. But if you only had these 2 points and we didn't draw the graph, how do you find your center point of your ellipse if you know what the 2 vertices are? Marie? Yeah, in the middle, using the midpoint. So what we need to do is find the midpoint of these 2 points. So we would add them up and divide by 2. So 2 minus negative 2, or 2 plus negative 2 is just 2 minus 2, sorry. Divide that by 2, so that would be your x's, 2 plus negative 2. And then we have to deal with our zeros, so 0 plus 0 divided by 2. So our midpoint is 0, 0. So our midpoint is right there, 0, 0. Now that we have the midpoint, can we use the information about the minor axis? Yeah, it says the minor axis is 2. So if it's 2, that means from the center you have to only go half of it, so that's 1. So up 1, down 1. So from all this information, we're able to figure out the minor axis, they told us, is 2. The major axis, we could count, it's what? 4. It's 4. So lastly, they want us to create the equation of the ellipse. So what do you think the equation's going to look like? The equation of the ellipse always has to be equal to 1. But what's the left side going to look like? Think about your center. Think about your major and minor axis. We know that we have 2 fractions. Marie? Okay. Yeah, it doesn't move left or right, it's at 0. What about for the y? Yeah, so it's just y squared. So the tops, the center is at the origin, 0, 0, so nothing is being added or subtracted to the x or the y. So that is the top, x squared and y squared, very good. But now we need to figure out the bottom. The bottom numbers deal with the length of the axis. So think about the steps if you have a number down here, how you find the axis, but if you have the axis, how do you work backwards to figure out which number should go here? Marie? Yeah, that's what you need to do. So if you have the length of the major or minor axis, what you would do is you take half of it, because that's the distance from the center to either the vertex or co-vertex. So you take half of it, so we'll look at the minor axis. Half of that is 1. 1 squared is 1. And that's with y, because your minor axis is up and down. What would you get for the major axis now? Follow the same steps. Marie? yeah, you have 2 divided by, or 4 divided by 2, sorry, that gets you 2. 2 squared is 4. That is the equation of your ellipse. Very good. All right, let's go down to the next one. Let's drop right below it. This one, the vertices are -6, 3 and 2, 3, and the co-vertices are -2, 5 and -2, 1. So before we draw any picture, how do we find the center? We know what the co-vertices are and the vertices are. What's one way we could find the center? We don't exactly want to know the distance. We want to know the midpoint.
Yeah.
So I'm going to use these 2 points, the vertices. I'm going to do -6 plus 2 divided by 2, comma 3 plus 3 divided by 2. So my center is going to be -2, 3. That's my center point. So now that we know what the center is, if you want to draw the graph, so -2, 3. Vertices are -6, 3, 2, 3. -2, 5, -2, 1. So my picture's not exactly drawn to scale because the coordinate plane wasn't given. It was drawn by hand, but it looks close. So it should look something similar to that. So we know the center, we have the graph. We need to know the distance of the major axis, minor axis, and then we can find our equation. So what is the distance of our minor axis? Distance of our minor axis. Remember, the minor axis is the smaller one. Anybody have it? From co-vertice to co-vertice. Ashley? 4, thank you. And go ahead and what is the major axis? If that's 4, what's the major axis? 8, thank you. Alright, so we have all the information we need. Now let's try to set up our equation of the ellipse. For our center, does our x value move from 0? Yes, it does, so we should have x what? Be careful, it's the opposite. It's at -2, so we need to add 2. That's squared. What about the y? Is it at 0 or did the y move? The y value of your center. You should have, well, y minus 3. Yep. Do the opposite, should be y minus 3 squared. Very good. Now we have the major and minor axis there. Let's try to figure out the denominator in this problem. So for the x's, the x is your major axis, that's the bigger one. What should your denominator be? What should your denominator be? Ashlyn? Okay, how did you get that? Divide this by 2 and square it, and you do get 16. Very good. Using the same reasoning, who can find the answer to this one for the y's, the minor axis? Anybody? We're a little sleepy today. Marie? It would be 4. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 2 squared is 4. So that is the equation of your ellipse. Very good. Any questions on the first two? Alright, very good so far. Let's go ahead to the top again. So let's go ahead and draw this one at the beginning. We're going to need up to 7. Okay. The center of the ellipse is 2, 3, and a vertex is 2, 7, and the coordinates of a focus are 2, 6. So a little bit different information than we've been given before. So we know the center is at 2, 3. We know there is a vertex at 2, 7, and we know there's a focus at 2, 6. So we know the ellipse is going to be going something like this from the top, because we have that focus near the top and the center down here. If you want to label it center, focus, vertex. But this is the top of our ellipse that would be coming down. So we know we're going to need the major axis and the minor axis. Right now, can we figure out one of those at least pretty easily? Which would it be, the major or the minor, that we can find pretty easily right now? Sorry, what was that, Marie? I just couldn't hear you. Fine. The major. So how can we find the major axis? Or do we know what the major axis is? Tori? Exactly. We know from the center to the vertex we have a distance of, what is it, 4 there? So we know the entire distance of the major axis has to be 8. So that one we could easily find with the information given so far. The other information right now we can't find easily. We're going to have to do another method. So we know the distance from the center to the vertex right now. We know the distance from the center to the focus point. If we know those two distances, how could we find the distance from the center to wherever this co-vertex is over here? It's going to be similar to something we did yesterday. Exactly, Pythagorean theorem. So we know if we create some, let me draw it the other direction, some triangle out to some co-vertex. Again, we don't know where this co-vertex is yet. I'm just placing a point there just so you can visualize it. We don't know where that's at. We don't know this distance, but we do know the distance to the focus, and we do know the hypotenuse, because the hypotenuse is the same as what? This is the important rule that we talked about. The hypotenuse is the same distance as what? Half of the major axis. In this case it would be 4. So we know this leg and we know this leg, and we need to, or this hypotenuse, so we need to solve for the missing leg. So the leg from the center to the focus is 3, so that's 3 squared. This leg from the center to the co-vertex or co-vertice we don't know, so we'll have that as b squared. And we know the hypotenuse has to be 4, so that's 4 squared. Pythagorean theorem, solve for b. So I get b as plus or minus square root of 7. So I know that from C to my covertice now is square root of 7. So what is my minor axis? Rebecca? Ashley? How did I get 7? This 16 minus 9. Because I subtracted the 3 squared over. Are you okay with that, Ashley? Yeah. Okay. Alright, Rebecca, did you figure out then the minor axis, or? Not quite. So I know this is half of it. The square root of 7 is half of it. How do I get the whole thing? Here's an example. If this was 3, how do I get the whole thing? We can't just make it 14 because there's a square root. Tori? 2 square roots of 7. You just multiply whatever that half is by 2. And you can leave it as 2 square roots of 7. Alright, so we're almost there. We still need the equation. So we know we're going to have 2 fractions equal to 1. Let's think about the center point first because that's always the easiest. So the x value, is it moved from 0 on our center point? It is, so it should be x what? X minus 2 or x plus 2? X minus 2, Grace? It should be minus, yes, x minus 2, very good. Our y, it is moved from 0. So our y value should be what? Is it going to be y minus 3 or y plus 3? Y minus 3 or y plus 3? Grace? Yes, minus also. Thank you. Now this is the part that could get a little tricky. Let's ignore the minor axis right now, and let's just look at the major axis. It's going to be the same way that we did the first two. So it'll be easier to think about. So refer to the first two that we completed. Let's find the major axis, which is going to be with the y's. And what is our value with the y, the denominator of our y? Same process that we used for these two. Ashley? 16. You take the value of the major axis, divide by 2 and square it. Very good. So if you use that same reasoning, divide by 2 and square it, what should our minor axis be if we divide by 2 and square it, Tori? You just get 7. Very good. Are we okay with that? Any questions? Did I lose anybody? Again, to find the minor axis in the equation, you divide it by 2 and square it. If you divide by 2, the 2's cancel. Square root of 7 squared just becomes 7. So that's how we found that value. Alright, last one. The center is 4, negative 3. A vertex is 1, negative 3. And a focus is 4 minus the square root of 2, negative 3. So I'm going to draw a little graph. Center is at 4, negative 3. Vertex is at 1, negative 3. If you wanted to actually graph it correctly, you could find the decimal version of this and plot this vertex somewhere within that point. We know our ellipse is going to be going this direction. So major axis, minor. So major axis again. We have all the information we need to find it. What is the major axis? Half of it is what? So the whole thing, you have to double it, which would be what? The whole length of the major axis is help me out, Sarah. Do you know what it is? 6. Thank you. The major axis would be 6. Okay, the minor axis, again, not easy to think about just yet, so we're going to use the Pythagorean theorem again. So we know that the distance from the center to the focus point has to be what? So this one might be a little different to think about, but from the center to the focus point, the distance is what? Is anybody sure about that one? We do know it. What is it? From the center to the focus point. I want that distance. You know it's there? Yeah, so you take, right here they tell you the focus is at 4 minus the square root of 2. Well, that's because they took the center point and they subtracted square root of 2. So that means that distance there has to be square root of 2. So in the Pythagorean theorem, we're going to have square root of 2 squared for that leg. We don't know what the distance is from the center to whatever the co-vertex is. So plus b squared. And then half of our major axis equals 3 squared. And solve it for b. Just so happens that we get the same answer as up above. So b is plus or minus square root of 7. So the minor axis is 2 square roots of 7, just like up above. But now we have a different equation to find. Some pieces might be the same, but okay, let's fill it in. From our center point, the top should be what with our x and y? Last one, so you guys tell me. Before you go on your own, what's going to be the top? Like pulling teeth this morning. 3 minus 4, and what about the y? Plus 3, thank you. Now we know from up above, if we use what we did up there, the minor axis was 2 square roots of 7. Well, the minor axis is with the y this time. It goes up and down, the minor axis. So with the y, we have to have a 7 there. It's the same process as the question up above. It's just flip-flopped. The minor axis is now up and down, not side to side. And if we look at our major axis, divided by 2, that's 3. 3 squared is 9. That is the equation of your ellipse. So our minor axis is 2 square roots of 7. So when you divide that by 2, the 2's cancel. Then you square the square root of 7. Square root of 7 times square root of 7 is 7. So that's where that came from. Okay? Any other questions? Alright, so like I said, your quiz is tomorrow. I did let you know your partners already. If you need a reminder on who that is, I can let you know. Otherwise, the rest of class today is to get your homework done because it is due tomorrow. Yes, Marie?